So today I'll be talking about developing features of Blizzard, AAA features at a major game company, sort of what goes into it. Uh, as a quick disclaimer, I am here by my own accord. Whatever I say, whatever happens in this presentation, not indicative of any opinions of Blizzard Entertainment. So yeah, if you're gonna get upset at anyone, get upset with me. So if you're not familiar with Blizzard, we're located in Irvine, California, founded in 1991. We're one of the few studios that both develops and publishes our own games. Blizzard has 4 main franchises: World of Warcraft, which is my franchise, Diablo, StarCraft, and Overwatch. And another thing that Blizzard is really known for is BlizzCon. It's this big convention that we host in Anaheim, California. It's a big celebration of everything Blizzard. So it spans 3 days, includes a huge spread of content from esports championships to cosplay competitions, talks with some of the developers like this. It's super fun. If you ever get a chance, come say hi. Super worth it. So a little more about myself. Yeah, I did graduate from DigiPen in 2017 from the RTS program. I started out doing stuff through the WANIC program, the Washington Network for Innovative Careers, in high school through DigiPen. Took a bunch of classes with them, realized that I loved programming, really wanted to pursue it as a career, went to DigiPen. The summer between my junior and senior year, I actually managed to get an internship on my current team with World of Warcraft. I didn't mess it up too badly. They liked me enough that they invited me back, and after I graduated, I moved down here. My job, so as Ray said, I'm a software engineer. My job is basically to focus on the engine team. So what I do is I work with the art team for WoW to develop sort of like the look. WoW has a very specific art style to it that we work very hard to maintain. Besides that, I also do engine level optimizations to make sure that the game can run on everywhere from a liquid cooled supercomputer to like a humble laptop, and yeah, helping making flashy new features for each expansion. This is a quick video of something that I've made in the past. So one feature I did for Battle for Azeroth, the current expansion, is I updated and refactored the weather system. So you can see we have like snow, we had ash in the last one. It was my very first contribution. This was my first project when I tackled coming back after my internship. It was super fun. Technical definition would be stochastic particles in a contained field. It can basically simulate anything that like floats, moves, twirls, anything through the air. Super exciting. I won't go through this whole video. I'll skip to some other parts. You can see there's like heavy fog. This has like sort of like these blood flies. This was like an infested swamp. And this was sort of one of the main dungeons for BFA. It's sort of like this infested mushroom spory area. It's got mold everywhere. And obviously you can see there's stuff floating around and makes it all sick and gross and really cool. But I'll be talking about a different project today. So basically what I'm going to cover is sort of stepping through the production process of a multi-billion-dollar game studio, going specifically through one of the features that I developed in our 8.2 patch for WoW. I'll be going through some of the good practices, some bad practices, and pitfalls to avoid, and just hopefully just give you guys a behind-the-scenes look of what does it actually take to get content into World of Warcraft. Hopefully show you guys that this stuff isn't magic, and with practice and training, you too could someday contribute to a Blizzard title. So I'll be talking today about the Waterwalls of Nazjatar. Nazjatar is the home of the Naga. This is one of the main content areas for our 8.2 patch, the other one being the home of the Mechanomes, the Mechagon. Nazjatar is the underwater domain of Queen Ashara, and it was the location of a gigantic raid, which is sort of our end game piece of content that players progress through toward the end of a patch's lifetime. So it's this big walls of water surrounds the entire zone. Looks really cool. But where do you even begin with something like this? Very early on in the process, we were trying to figure out, what does Nazjatar look like? And we knew that it had to have these big walls of water. The story behind it is sort of that Ashara rips a hole in the ocean where her city lies, and it sort of captures your ship and everything comes crashing down. And you can't do that with just having like just rocks around you like a bowl, like just magically appear out of the ocean. It really needed to feel like magic was forcing this big chasm open. It was my first major project at Blizzard. My team was very clear with me when we started that it was non-negotiable for release, and that if I really needed more time, I needed to let them know early on so that we could push back the patch launch date. So a little bit of pressure for sure compared to some of my other projects, but it was really exciting to work on. It's always cool to work on sort of one of the keystone uh, pieces of a patch. So when we're trying to start something like this, there's a lot of questions that we ask ourselves at Blizzard. And one of the first ones is sort of the why, like why are we doing this? And it's very easy to get sort of like an initial answer, like why are we doing this? Oh, it looks cool. But you want to try to dig a little deeper into it to understand more of, well, I guess the why, right? And for us, it was all about the fantasy and just the epicness. This was a major moment. It was going to be sort of like a betrayal, as your ship is being devoured up by the ocean, and having this underwater city open up was really important. Um, beyond this, figuring out what your win condition is also important. Having a win condition, sort of like a goal, is important to have a general heading. If you don't have this win condition or a goal, you don't know, like, should we do this? Should we not do this? And usually how it works is, anything that hurts one of your win conditions needs to be weighed very carefully. For us, we really wanted that wow factor, like the emotional feel of, wow, we're stranded, the boat was destroyed, the ocean swallowed us up. Had to be a really cool moment. And as you're having these really grandiose ideas being thrown around all over the place, something that's really important is keeping scope in mind. How much time are we willing to spend on this? How many engineers are we going to place on this? For this, the water walls were considered one of the main features of the patch, so I had a lot of time allocated to it. I think overall, from start to finish, I had about 4 to 5 months, which is a lot of time. And it wasn't exclusively on the water walls. I have other jobs and tasks to do in between working on the water wall stuff, but by and large, definitely the water walls took like 4 to 5 months. Whoa. I thought that would mute my thing. It did not. Okay. The last thing you need to figure out are stakeholders. And the stakeholders are sort of the people whose opinions really matter. At Blizzard, everyone's opinions matter. I can weigh in on pretty much anything and get feedback from design or artists, but sort of the directors at the top, the production director, the game director, they're the ones that have the power to go thumbs down. This doesn't look good. You need to redo it. So very important to get those people on board very early. It would be completely disastrous if we forgot a stakeholder or someone wasn't represented, and then way down the production line, we realize, oh no, we made a mistake, we forgot something. We need to go back and redo everything. That can be really expensive for time, for financial reasons. Pushing the date back, not very good. And yeah, start early. Like I said, water walls were determined as a very necessary feature very early on. I think I started on it before we actually launched BFA, so this was about 2 patches ahead of schedule. So once you have this idea, you're like, okay, we want to try to do this. It kind of goes back to the engineer, to some of the artists that I work with. Okay, how do we get started? What is this going to look like? So a lot of that involves exploring the existing space. Unfortunately, I couldn't find many games that had big walls of water. We actually ended up going to a very popular pirate movie that you've probably all seen. It has massive walls of water in it as they're sort of going to, like, I think they're going to the bottom of the ocean to find like a weapon or something. But we kind of looked to that for inspiration, seeing what it looked like, what pieces did we like, what pieces do we not like, what do we try to emulate, just to try to establish like a baseline of where to start. At this point, it's really important to be flexible. A lot of ideas get tossed around. A lot of prototypes are going to get made. It's important to not become like emotionally attached to it. Otherwise, you can start to feel attacked when someone says, oh, this doesn't look good, we need to just cut it and redo it. Past this, figuring out what the important pieces are, sort of similar to exploring the existing space. These important pieces are very important, again, for determining direction. Early on for Najatar, we realized that we really wanted like big transparent pieces of fast moving water, and then the noisy white water, like if you've ever seen like White River rafting, the water gets frothy. Those were mandatory components. We needed that to sell the idea that this was a wall of water. And after we have these sort of core ideas going and flowing, it's just iteration. A big focus of Blizzard is iteration. We aren't magic. The correct answer doesn't just magically come to us in a bottle. We spend a lot of time trying to improve and improve until we hit our mark. And for me personally, my work style is sort of quick, efficient prototyping. Some would say hacking, but yeah, I say prototyping, followed by methodical execution. So just as soon as we figured out, okay, this is the direction we're going to go, just starting to hammer out tasks. We went through a lot of prototypes with this. I'm going to walk through a couple with you guys. Let me switch there we go. Okay, so this was really, really early on. This does not look like it belongs in World of Warcraft. This looks like it belongs in like an N64 or something. It's you'll note that it is the core goals, right? We talked about the white water down at the bottom and sort of the big transparent pieces of water in the body, and it has that. Just it doesn't look very good. I think this was maybe like a week or two past like when we started. I'm not even the correct zone. I spawned this in, I think it's Stormsong Valley, which is just a different zone completely. Whole thing is held together with duct tape. This was like the first version. There's a second version that looks a little bit better. You can see that we've iterated a little bit on the whitewater part. The center blue part really hasn't changed. And to be honest, I never considered this game ready, and I never remotely thought it would try to make it into the game. And some people might ask, why? Why would you even work on something if you know that it's not going to work? And to me, it's kind of like carving a marble statue. You need to start somewhere, or it's never going to take shape. You have to get the really crude pieces out of the way to just get the general idea, and then you can start putting in details. You can start polishing, start heading toward that final product. And one thing for us that we kind of wrestled with while we were doing these early prototypes was the lack of refraction. If you look at water, you can't just look straight through it, right? It distorts light as it's going through. It's a very important piece. And early testing that we did, people just kept saying, it doesn't really look like water. It looks like a window with like weird white stuff all over it. Not necessarily like the ocean being held back by magic. This is slightly different. Is this the same video? It is the same video. I don't know why I didn't advance my slide. Now for us, players have a lot of expectations for WoW, and our expectations are even higher. A big part of being a AAA company, about being Blizzard, is pushing the envelope of what's possible. Now going back to the scope part, we had a lot of discussion over what we might try, how much effort we were willing to expend on this task, and we kept coming back to the same conclusion that this is one of the main pieces of Nazjatar. It's the entire zone. It needs to be big, it needs to be bold, and we decided that we had to have real-time refraction in the water, just like other liquids in the game, much to my chagrin. So we tried it, and this was the prototype that came out of that. So you can see, looking at the white water, it's a lot different now. It looks a lot better. It looks like it's flowing. It looks like like it has a super defined shape, and it's more just alive. You can see toward the top, it's got refraction going on. It's distorting what's behind it. This scene overall is actually a really early look at Nazjatar. You can see obviously that the water walls are missing all around the zone. There's no fog. You've got crazy red geometry, which says that the engine has something broken and that you need to fix it. And yeah, very, very early on. One thing you'll notice about what we've been tweaking with the water walls is that they're all around our core features, the white water and the blue, now refractive water. That's what we've been dancing around. All of our changes are about those two things. We're not trying to add more. We're not trying to change the original recipe. It's all just making modifications to the core features that we know we have to have. So showed that to the art team. They really liked it. Showed it to some other teams. They also liked it. So we decided, hey, okay, we are going to move forward with this. This is no longer a prototype. We're going to start moving this into production. Let me get a quick drink. So unfortunately, what this means is meetings. Going back to those stakeholders, we need stakeholder approval from all major stakeholders on the team. So this involves engineering, art, and design. For engineering approval, it's a lot of math and technical explanations. It's me explaining to my coworkers, hey, this is how I'm going to do it. These are the problems I think I'm going to encounter. This is how I'm going to compensate for them. And a lot will come out of those talks. Either other engineers will be like, you know what, that sounds good. They will help poke holes in my logic, holes in my plan, not because they hate me, but because we really want this to work. And if we don't find an issue early on, again, it becomes very expensive to fix later. At the same time as we're doing this, we're talking to art, and art's a little different. The engineering one is pretty much a one-off. Basically, we sit down, and if we decide, hey, this is good, we're done. No more stakeholder meetings with engineering. With art, it's this continual process of week in, week out. We're meeting with them, we're showing them our progress, getting their feedback. Because I can't just show art what it's going to look like at the end of the game, at the end of the cycle, right? They don't know what it's really going to look like in the end, so they want to stay up to date. They want to stay in the loop, and they help a lot. There are weeks where you go in and you're like, hey, this is what we have, and they're like, hey, that's great, that's awesome. And there are other weeks where you come in and they look at what you got and they're like, well, I don't know about this, and this looks kind of weird, and you should probably tweak this. And again, it's all constructive. No one wants the feature to die. We just want it to be the best we can be. The last stakeholder that we need to get approval from is design. And for design, the question is, does this work for the content that we want to design? If you asked your parents for a cat or a kitten or a dog for Christmas and you got a toaster, you know, yes, you got something for Christmas, but you can't walk a toaster. It needs to be able to do what design wants to do. And in this case, there was actually a major issue that we had to tackle with design. So this is a map of Nazjatar and the whole area. You'd never guess it, but Nazjatar has a very, very specific shape. Nazjatar is mostly convex. If you're not familiar with that term, convex means that your outline is curved like the exterior of a sphere. When I was a kid, I was always taught that concave has like a cave in it, an impression. And for the diligent observer, you'd say, Matt, hey, Nazjatar has a concave piece, and you'd be totally correct. It's down here on this bottom right side. And this concave piece they made that piece really early on, before I had really come to terms with the technical limitations for the water wall. And it did not work with my tech. Transparent surfaces are actually an incredibly difficult part of graphics. Pretty much an unsolved problem. We don't do transparencies very well in any sort of game. And if it's concave at this point, what it means is that you can look through the water wall multiple times. So you can be standing on the outside, you look in the water wall, out the water wall, into another water wall, and there's like air and stuff, and it doesn't look right. If from a physical stance, light should refract off the first contact point with the water wall. It should be refracting off the second contact point with the water wall and refracting off the final contact point, which basically requires ray tracing. WoW is not known for its incredibly high min spec, so forcing the player base to get ray tracing cards was not a solution. So, I talked with design. I was like, "Hey guys, this isn't good," and we hummed and hawed. We discussed technical solutions. I think my estimate for how long it would take me to get around it was like an additional 3 to 4 weeks, which wasn't acceptable to the timeline. And in the end, actually, design had a really good idea. They placed a really big rock on that corner, just a big rock. Totally blocks your line of sight. You can't see through it because it's a rock, and totally helps hide all the glaring weakness in my tech. The zone itself was already in this area sort of rocky, so it wasn't a big change, just add a rock. And yeah, we kept it in. And so something that you may not know. Okay, so everything that I just described to you is basically the first month or so, maybe month and a half of production. And I said it took me about 4 or 5 months to do. Once you get through all that, you still have to make it. It's a lot of code. At the end of the day, I think it was like 9 to 10,000 lines of code, more or less. Due to the complications with transparent stuff, we had to change a lot of how we sort things, how we deal with stuff. And as you're working on this, a lot of things can happen. Changes in the production schedule, bug testing. QA is unfortunately really good at finding bugs in my code. So when they find that, you have to go back, you have to fix it, and sometimes that can cause like a domino effect of, this is like a fundamental bug, that means I have to change this other thing, which means I have to change this other thing. So that can be really difficult to work with. Outside of that, there's a very dangerous phrase, wouldn't it be cool if, that gets tossed around a lot at Blizzard, and it's how we come up with some of our greatest ideas. Wouldn't it be cool if X? For Nazjatar, this ended up being, wouldn't it be cool if you fought in this crazy water wall dome, and wouldn't it be cool if we had water walls in our cinematics? It was both super good ideas. They ended up not being too much work, so the last 2 bosses in Nazjatar have these crazy water domes around them, and for the last boss, it's crazy. Like Ashara like punches through and water's like pouring in, and it's sort of like the shield against the ocean, and it's cracking, and in the end she gets like ripped through it. Super cool. Super cool ideas. but you need to be careful of feature creep, because every time you add stuff like this, it's taking more and more time. And there's a lot of other ideas that, while they're still cool, they have much less of an impact. One of the early ones we talked about for the final raid was having like this, you're sort of fighting in the dome. So you have to like swim out the bottom of the dome, and then you have to swim all the way to the peak of the dome. They have to crash through the ceiling and attack the boss. And it was cool, but it didn't really add anything. It had a lot of technical requirements that we'd have to add. So it just didn't make it into the game. And yeah, so it's easy to get distracted at this point, but you really need to be careful. And if you manage all of that, you can get to something like this. So this was the final demo reel we recorded for an art presentation as we finished. The world's done, the fog's done, waterfalls are in, they're optimized, they're mostly, knock on wood, bug-free. You have cool points of refraction, and of course we have our friend the big rock here, helping avoid any graphical issues due to limitations. And it looks awesome. My lead was really happy. I was really happy. Directors are really happy. Everyone loved the water walls. The tech is actually being used in Shadowlands. If you look at the ground, sort of like underneath the aisles, you can see that there's like these crazy rippling cloud layers, all the same tech. It's super versatile, and yeah, we're really happy with how it turned out. So in conclusion, there is a ton of work that goes on into features. And I know that there are a ton of people that didn't even give that wall a second thought. They loaded into the zone, they looked around, like, oh, that's cool. And it just became a part of the backdrop, and they never looked at it again. Opposite to that, there are people I've talked to who loved it. They told me about like the goosebumps that they felt when they're looking over this destroyed zone and the oceans being held back. And that's the best feeling in the world, to know that someone is like actively playing your game, they're getting into your content, and that they love it. Second, it takes an army of people, very different, very talented people like this. It's not just engineers, it's not just artists. It's engineers, artists, producers, QA, cinematics, designers, even people you don't think about, people in business, marketing, all important pieces of the game development machine. The game wouldn't succeed if you just ripped out one of those cogs. There are a lot of battles behind the scenes that you'll never know about. You may just walk past a crate, and that crate probably took 100 man hours. Artists had to make it. It had to be critiqued. It had to be optimized. All these different things had to happen in order to get that crate in the game. So if there's one thing you pull from this presentation, don't take games for granted. They are super rewarding to work on. They are super fun, super exciting. They are very hard. And you should make sure that you really want to do this before pursuing a job in the games industry. But if you do, it will be totally worth it.